Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah El Gimel Amir Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Samach Gimel Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the bottom line of Samach Gimel Amid Aleph. We have one Mishnah Berurah left from Reish Pei Hey Sif Aleph. We have Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Gimel. Looking back, I'm not sure why I left that Mishnah Berurah out yesterday, but we're going to have to cover that, some unfinished business really from yesterday's topic, and then we'll move on. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. Hanesunim batzaru b'ashivya ha'imdim bein bayam u'bein bayabasha hamakim yirachem aleihem v'yitziam mitzaru l'rvacha me'afelo la'oiro mishibud l'geula hashta b'agala uvizman kariv v'nemar amein. Our learning should be a schus for Shalema, for Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, for Daniel ben Naomi. Our learning should be a schus for Yisrael. It's amazing that I've been saying these names for so long now. For some reason, there's some kind of mental block. I always have to look back at my notepad over here to remember the name, and it looks to me like somebody actually took my little piece of paper. But it's Yisrael. I know Yonason ben Michal and Yoel ben Michal and Yisrael. I don't remember exactly. Yisrael ben, I think it was Yisrael ben Rachel. Okay, whatever it is, the Rosh Hashanah knows who they are. The Gemara actually says that when you mispal for a chayla, mikra din, you don't have to say the name. The Rosh Hashanah knows who these people are. The Rosh Hashanah should protect them together with all of our other brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol makom shehem. So here in Siman Reish Pei Hey, we're learning the halachas of Shtay Mikra ve'Echad Targum. I actually want to spend a little bit more time on it and get a little bit more in detail than what we normally do, since this is a halacha. I mean, all of these halachas are halachas that are negea all the time, but being Mavis Sedra, this is something that everybody does every week, the parsha of the week, something that's so important, and something that everybody is so deeply connected with. I think it behooves us to spend a little extra time on it. Since I have this last Mishnah Berurah Katan Gimel on Sif Aleph, I'm just going to read Sif Aleph in the Mechaber again. Says the Mechaber, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, 2 lines off the bottom, Reish Pei Hey Sif Aleph. Even though everybody hears the laning of the parsha of the week every Shabbos B'tzibur, so over the year you are going to hear the laning of Kol HaTorah Kula, still there's another chiyuv. Chayav likrois la'atzmai b'chol shavua parshas oisai shavua. Every week you have a chiyuv, you're obligated. Excuse me. Every week you have a chiyuv, besides your chiyuv of hearing the parsha laned by the Balkare in Shul, you have another chiyuv, which is to read the parsha yourself each week. Shnayim Mikra. You have to read the text of the psukim in Lashon HaKodesh twice, the Echad Targum, and then you have to read the Targum Unkelus once. And says the Mechaber, this applies even afilu atarois v'divain, even to the pasuk of atarois and divain. Now, what is this pasuk of atarois and divain that the Mechaber is referencing here? This is a pasuk in Parshas Matos. It's Perek Lamed Beis Pasuk Gimel, and this is where the Bnei Gad and the Bnei Ruvain approached Moshe Rabbeinu, and they said that they don't want to wait to get their inheritance of land until they go across the Yarden into Eretz Yisrael proper. They want to take an inheritance. They want to take a nachala me'ever liyarden. They want to take a nachala on the other side, on the eastern banks of the Yarden. That's where they want to take their nachala. And the pasuk delineates the names of some of the cities that they asked for. And 2 of them are Ataros and Divain. But the significance of this pasuk is that the entire pasuk is only names of cities. Ataros, V'Divain, V'Yazer, V'Nimra, V'Cheshbain, V'El Olei, Usavam, Unavai, Uva'ain. We have 9 cities over here listed in the pasuk. Now, says the Mechaber, you might think that there's really no reason to do Shnayim Mikra ve'Echad Targum on this pasuk. I mean, Shnayim Mikra, I can understand. Repeat the pasuk twice. Okay, you always have to repeat the psukim twice. So Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemar, you're going to say it twice. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemar, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemar. Fine. So you want to tell me I have to say Ataros v'Divan v'Yaz v'Dimra v'Chedben v'Aloli Yisfamu Devay v'Ayin twice? I get it. But why do I have to say Targum? These are names of cities. What's the Targum going to be? The Targum, one would imagine, is going to be HaTorah, divine, right? What's the translation of HaTorah? HaTorah, right? What's the translation of New York? New York. So what's the point in saying the Targum? Says the Mechaber, no. Even though there doesn't seem to be any point, because it's just repetitive, still you need to say the Targum. So yeah, you might end up saying HaTorah v'divan v'yazav v'nimra v'chedron v'alolo yisfav v'vayvayin 3 times. But you still need to do that. That's what the Mechaber seems to be saying. Now there is something that I want to point out, and that is that if you actually look in the Targum on that pasuk, you're in for a surprise. There is Targum on that pasuk. HaTorah, says the Targum, machlelta. V'divain, says the Targum, umalbeshta. V'yazer, says the Targum, v'chumrin. Nimra is base nimrin. Cheshbain, base chushbana. El ole is bale devava. Nevai, v'sima, and then Nevai is base kivurta de Moshe, the burial place of Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu was buried on Har Nevai. So there actually is Targum Onkelos on this pasuk of HaTorah v'divain. Some suggest that this Targum is not really Targum Onkelos, that the Targum on this pasuk was actually pulled from Targum Yerushalmi. And it's not really Targum Onkelos, but the Targum Onkelos itself was, like the Mechaber suggests, just a repeat of the pasuk. But be that as it may, the halakha that we're getting from the Mechaber over here is, you need to be Marvis Sedra, you need to do Shnaya Mikra, and even if the Targum just seems to be a complete repetition, the exact same words of the pasuk, you need to read the Targum. Now, if you do that, in essence, what are you doing? You're saying the pasuk 3 times. You're not really doing Shnaya Mikra at Echad Targum. Really, there is no Targum. So what are you doing? You're doing Shloisha Mikra. You're doing Mikra 3 times. Now, there's a very important Chiddush and Halacha in that. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here. Bottom line, Samach Gimel Abed Aleph, Mishnah Berurah is Cotton Gimel. V'divain, Ritzayin Elaymar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, Af al pi she'ein by Targum. Even though there really is no Targum on this pasuk, it's just a repeat, still, you have to say it. Which means that you're saying the pasuk 3 times. Says the Mishnah Berurah, first of all, v'hu adin, there's another pasuk that this will apply to, and this is a pasuk at the very beginning of Sefer Shemais and Parsha Shemais. V'hu adin, Ruvain v'Shimon. We have the pasuk at the very beginning of Parsha Shemais that just lists the names of the Shvatim. Well, what's the Targum of Ruvain? Ruvain. What's the Targum of Shimon? Shimon. So again, if you're going to say the Targum on the pasuk of Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Dan, Naphtali, etc., there really is no Targum. So you're just repeating the pasuk 3 times. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'huadin Ruvain v'Shimon v'kayotza bazeh, or any other similar pasuk, tzarich likroisai shalosh pa'amim. You need to say it 3 times. Now, again, what I want to stress over here is, because it's going to come up later in the Mishnah Berurah, what you see over here is that when you have no Targum, you don't say, okay, there's no Targum, so I'm just going to do Shnaya Mikra, and I'm going to leave out the Echad Targum. No. When there's no Targum, you know what you do? You do Mikra 3 times. Very important concept that's going to come up shortly. And this is taken, by the way, from a Taisus in Brachas Tav Ches Amud Aleph. Taisus doesn't say it on his own. Taisus is actually quoting it as being Shitas Rashi, that when you have no Targum, you say the Mikra 3 times. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'yesh machmirin, there are those that are machmir, and they say, de ba'atoros v'divain, in the pasuk of Atoros v'divain, sheyesh by Targum Yerushalmi, where there is Targum Yerushalmi on the pasuk of Atoros v'divain, tzarich likroi shama Targum. So what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is, there are machmirim who say, all right, you did Shnaya Mikra, you said the pasuk of Atoros v'divain twice, you looked in the Onkelos, there is no Targum Onkelos. So you know what? Go to the Targum Yerushalmi. There is Targum Yerushalmi on that pasuk. A lot of the words that I read to you from what we have printed in the Targum Onkelos actually are taken from the Targum Yerushalmi. So are those that say if there's no Targum Onkelos, so do Targum Yerushalmi. Okay, I'm going to pause over here for a moment before we go on to Sif Beis, and I want to talk a little bit about this chiyuv of Shnaya Mikra v'Echad Targum. One thing that the Mechaber doesn't give us, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't give us, is what is the source? We have this over here. The Mechaber says it very strongly. Chayiv likrois la'atzmai b'chol shavua, parsha soisei shavua. This is a chiyuv. This is not, a minig, and we see it in the Gemara in Brachas. So this is a chiyuv to do shtayim mikra ve'echad targum. Where does it come from? What is it based on? So I took a look at the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan says that the chiyuv of shtayim mikra ve'echad targum was a takana of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Aruch HaShulchan implies that not only it was a takana of Moshe Rabbeinu's, it was part and parcel of Moshe Rabbeinu's takana of Kriyas HaTorah. We know that the whole takana of Kriyas HaTorah is based on Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu hiskin li Yisrael, that we shouldn't go 3 days without Torah. So he was misakin that there should be a Kriyas HaTorah on Monday, a Kriyas HaTorah on Thursday, a Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos, and then another Kriyas HaTorah Shabbos you have to do by Mincha. So this is takanas Moshe Rabbeinu all of a shalom. Part of Moshe Rabbeinu's takana was that not only should we listen to a Kriyas HaTorah in shul, we also should read the parsha ourselves, Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum, every week. The Aruch HaShulchan, first he says, we don't know the tam. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu was misakin it, but why? So first he says, we don't know the tam. Then interestingly enough, several lines later, he gives a tam. The tam, the reasoning that the Aruch HaShulchan gives for this chiyuv, is that we know that when it comes to Torah, we have a chiyuv of lishmaya, to listen. We also have a chiyuv limud, to learn. Right? This is what we say in Avarabba. Lishmaya, lilmoid. We also say lalame, to teach. But two of the chiyuvim that we have over there are lishmaya, to hear, to listen, and lilmoid, to learn. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is misakin first lishmaya. There has to be a time that we come to shul and we listen to the Kriyas HaTorah, but we also need lilmoid. We have to make sure that everybody is going to learn, and therefore he made a chiyuv of shtayim mikra ve'echad targum so that you're also going to learn. Now, the Lavush comes, and the Lavush says there's another reason for shtayim mikra ve'echad targum. He says, kedei sheyehe rogel b'ma shetzibur korim. Moshe Rabbeinu made a takana that you have to listen to Kriyas HaTorah. Says the Lavush, people are going to come to shul, they're going to sit down to hear Kriyas HaTorah. If they never learned the parsha themselves, they have no idea what they're listening to. If they have no idea what they're listening to, they're not really going to listen, right? They're just going to sit there and maybe schmooze with the guy next to them because they don't know what they're hearing anyway. Says the Lavush, that there's a chiyuv of shtayim mikra ve'echad targum, which preferably you should complete your shtayim mikra ve'echad targum before Kriyas HaTorah in shul, so that when you sit down to Kriyas HaTorah, you know what you're listening to. You already went through the parsha. The Beis Yosef, I think I didn't write down here in my notes, the Beis Yosef said something very, very similar. The lashon of the Beis Yosef, I believe, was so that a person should be baki b'Torah. So I'm not sure if, again, I don't know if the Beis Yosef is really linking it to Kriyas HaTorah like the Lavush does, or stam. The Beis Yosef is saying is that we want people to be baki, to be very knowledgeable, at least in the very basics of Torah, which is Chumash. That's the basics. It's the Aleph base. So we want them to be baki at least in that. So in order to do that, we make them read each parsha twice and go through the Targum, which is a basic pirush on the Torah. Now, another thing that we're going to have to tackle is precisely how you should be mekayim the mitzvah of shtayim mikra ve'echad targum. Now, when it comes to that, we did Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Bays yesterday. And in Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Bays, the Mishnah Berurah brought down two different minhagim of how precisely you should do shtayim mikra ve'echad targum. He brought down one shita that said that you should read each parsha first Shnayim Mikra. Each parsha you should read the psukim twice, and then you should read the Targum on that parsha. What does that mean, parsha? It doesn't mean Parshas Bereshis, Parshas Noach, Parshas Lech Lecha. It means you should read from one psucha or stuma to the next psucha or stuma. What are psuchas and stumas? Psuchas and stumas are the gaps that you see in the Sefer Torah, the little spaces in the Sefer Torah that break down the Chumash into individual parshiyos. We usually use the word individual parshiyos to refer to the individual sedris of the week. Bereshis is a parsha, Noach is a parsha. Halakhically, that's not what the word parsha means. The word parsha means a section that is sectioned off by a gap in the writing of the Sefer Torah. If you look at a Chumash, how do you know where the parshas begin and where the parshas end? So in the Chumash, you'll see either a samach or a pei. And the difference between a samach and a pei is how large is the gap in the Sefer Torah. So each section, each parsha, is sectioned off by samachs and peis. That's a parsha. So the first minig brought down by the Mishnah Berurah is that you should read a parsha, read one section, then read it again, that's Shtayim Mikra, then do the Targum on that section, then go to the next section, do Shtayim Mikra Vecha Targum. The second minig that the Mishnah Berurah brought was that you should do each pasuk. You should do a pasuk, read the pasuk twice, and then do the targum on that pasuk. So you shouldn't do a whole parsha. No, you should do it pasuk by pasuk. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemar, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemar, and then read the targum on Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemar. Then go to the next pasuk, read the pasuk twice, and then do the targum on that pasuk. So those are the two minhagim that the Mishnah Berurah brought down. After bringing down the two minhagim, the Mishnah Berurah said, the Ovid Kamar Ovid or the Ovid Kamar Ovid. You could do it this way, you could do it that way. Doesn't matter which way you choose, you could do it either way. The Mishnah Berurah then brought down from the Gra that the Gra did it by doing each parsha, each section at a time, or sometimes the Gra would do a little bit differently. Instead of doing a section, he would do a topic. So even if the topic was maybe longer than one section or shorter than one section, he would do that topic twice and then do the targum on that topic. Now, are these the only ways that you could do Shtayim Mikra Vecha Targum? It seems not. It's brought down from the Stipler Goyen, that was Chaim Kanievsky, Zechariah Levracha's father, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. They say on the Stipler that the Stipler, I think, would do the whole parsha, the whole sedra, twice, and then do the Targum. Rav Chaim Kanievsky brought down, he said, I saw brought down in his name, that some people like to do one aliyah at a time. So they'll start the Sedra and they'll do Tisheni. And then they'll do it again to Sheni, and then they'll do the Targum till Sheni. Then they'll do from Sheni to Shlishi, Shtayim Mikra Ve'echa Targum. Then from Shlishi to Revi, and so on and so forth. Some people do it that way because they break it down during the week. On Sunday, they do from the beginning of the Sedra till Sheni. On Monday, they do from Sheni to Shlishi. On Tuesday, they do from Shlishi to Revi. In this way, they make sure to get it completed during the week. And also in this way, they don't lose track of where they're up to. So we have these different minhagim that are brought down. What I was makabel from my Rabbeim is that there isn't ultimately such a great concern of exactly how you do the Shtayim Mikra Vecha Targum, so long as you do first Shnayim Mikra and then Targum. You can't do Targum and then Mikra. You shouldn't do Mikra once and then Targum and then Mikra a second time. You should make sure to do Shnayim Mikra. You should do the Psukim twice first and then the Targum. But exactly how you break it up, you have to do it in a way that works for you. A way that is going to make it comfortable for you to do it, where you're going to be at ease doing it, and you're not going to lose the place, and you're going to know where you're up to, and you're going to make sure that you finish. That's the way that you should do it, and we're going to see a little bit more on this topic as we go through the Siman. Okay. So now we pick up on the very bottom line of Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, last two words in the Shulchan Aruch, Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, Im Lamad a Parsha b'Pirush Rashi. How about if you do the Sedra and you do it with Rashi? To a lot of people, Targum Onkelos is Greek. They look at the words of Targum Onkelos, it's Aramaic, they're not familiar with the words. It doesn't really mean anything to them. It feels almost more like davening than actually learning a Pirush of any kind. But Rashi is a Pirush. So says the Mechaber, if you learn the Parsha b'Pirush Rashi, if you do the Sedra with Rashi, Choshuv Kemoi Targum. That is just as good as doing the Targum. So the Mechaber says, you know how you could be Yoitze Shtayim Mikra Vecha Targum? Do the Psukim twice and do all the Rashis. You're Yoitze Shtayim Mikra Vecha Targum, and you don't have to do the Targum Onkelos. Says the Mishnah Berurah on that, Ois Katan Daled b'Pirush Rashi. The Mishnah Berurah explains, Shehu Mefarish HaMikra K'moshe Mefarish HaTargum V'Yoyse Mimenu. He explains the Psukim the same way the Targum does, v'yoser mimenu, but it's even a more in-depth pirush. It's a much more in-depth explanation of the psukim than the Targum Onkelos is. So if you could be Mekayim Shtayim Mikra V'Echad Targum by doing the psukim and doing the Targum Onkelos, certainly you could be Mekayim Shtayim Mikra V'Echad Targum by doing Shtayim Mikra and then Rashi. You're doing the psukim twice and you're doing a pirush on the whole parsha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Aval im kara b'shar laz shehu mefarish rakas hamilos lechud. How about if you do the psukim twice and then you read an English translation of the psukim, not a pirush, not an explanation, not an elucidation. All you're going to do is Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Lemar, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Lemar, and God spoke to Moses saying. So you read the pasuk twice in Lashon HaKodesh, and then you read an English translation. Does that work? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Lo yotza yedei chevasei b'mkoim targum. You can't be yotza shtayim mikra v'echad targum by substituting the English translation or a French translation instead of the Targum Onkelos. Why? Levisha Targum mefaresh kama dvarim she'en lahavin mitoich hamikra. Targum Onkelos is not a simple translation. Targum Onkelos actually has elucidation in it. I'll give you an example from the pasuk that we just read. HaTorah v'divain. One of the psukim, one of the towns or cities in that pasuk is Nivoi. Says the Targum Onkelos, Beis Kevurta de Moshe, the burial place of Moshe Rabbeinu. So Beis Kevurta de Moshe is not a translation of Nivoi, it's an elucidation of Nivoi. So there are a lot of places in the Chumash where the Targum is not a simple translation, it's actually an elucidation. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, can you substitute Targum Onkelos for an English translation? No, you can't, because all it is a translation, it's not an elucidation. So the Mechaber said Rashi is choshev k'moi Targum. Rashi is just as good as Targum. Valkein, and therefore says the Chavetz Chaim, Yoitze b'ma shekoreh shnei pamim mikra ve'echad pirush Rashi. Therefore, you could be Yoitze shnei mikra ve'echad Targum by doing the psukim inside in Lashon HaKodesh twice and learning the whole pirush Rashi. Now, what do? There are a lot of psukim that don't have Rashi on them. So what happens with those psukim? Over there, l'chayra, you're only doing shnai mikra, you're not doing any Targum. There's no Rashi on those psukim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and this is why I was stressing what the Mishnah Berurah said earlier, va'oisan psukim she'ein aleim pirush Rashi, the psukim that don't have Rashi, yikra oisan shalosh pa'amim. Those psukim you should read 3 times. So this is just like what we learned earlier, when the Mishnah Berurah said that by HaTorah v'divain, which seemingly doesn't have Targum Onkelos, yet the Mechaber says you have to read the Targum anyway. Why do I have to read the Targum anyway? All I'm doing is repeating the pasuk 3 times. Yes, when there's no Targum, you read the pasuk 3 times. So too over here, the Mechaber says you could be Yoitze Shtayim Mikra V'Echad Targum by doing Mikra twice and then doing Pirush Rashi. But you have psukim that don't have Pirush Rashi. So do you just get a pass? Those psukim are just Shtayim Mikra and no Targum? No. Those psukim, you should read the Lashon HaKodesh of the pasuk 3 times. Now, and this is going to come up again later on. How about if somebody is faced with the following dilemma? He wants to do Shtayim Mikra V'Echad Targum. The Targum Onkelos doesn't mean anything to him. He doesn't understand it at all. It's like davening. Rashi, he doesn't understand Rashi either. He doesn't have a good background in learning Torah, unfortunately, and he can't learn Rashi by himself. And he doesn't have an art scroll of Rashi. So what should he do? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Roi likrois bepirush HaTorah sheyesh b'lashon Ashkenaz bizmanenu. You could read a pirush on Chumash that's written in another language, like German. Ashkenaz is German, or Yiddish, or English. Kigoin, the Mishnah Berurah says, Sefer Tzena Ure'ena. The Tzena Ure'ena is written in Yiddish. What is the Tzena Ure'ena? It's a basic pirush on Chumash. So okay, read the Chumash twice, Shnayim Mikra. Then you can't do Targum. It doesn't mean anything to you. You can't do Rashi. You're not capable of learning Rashi. Read the Tzena Rena. The Tzena Rena is a basic Pirush on Chumash. The Keyotzabay, or another Pirush on Chumash, Hamivarim is a parsha that explains the parsha al pi Pirush Rashi, based on Rashi's explanations. Ushar Chachamenu Zal Habenuyim al Yesod Talmud, or other reliable explanations of the Chumash that are based on Rashi, that are based on Divrei Chazal from the Gemara. So an example to me would be, I have over here, this is the very famous Art Scroll Chumash, the stone Chumash that just about everybody is familiar with. What does the stone Chumash have inside? If you read the cover, the Torah, HaTorah, the 5 Megillas, with a commentary and anthologized from the rabbinic writings. If you open up the Chumash and you look in the bottom over here, it has over here an English Pirush that is based on Rashi and on Divrei Chazal. So to give you an example, right? If you turn to the very beginning, of Parshas Toldos, right? That's what we're going to be learning the Shabbos. We're going to be learning Parshas Toldos. So you go to the Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham, right? These are the descendants of Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avraham Holid as Yitzchak. Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. Vahi Yitzchak ben Arba Mishana. Yitzchak was 40 years old. Bekachta is Rivka when he married Rivka bas Besuel Arami, etc., etc. You have over here an English anthology, an English Pirush over here. Rebecca's barrenness and pregnancy. The sages note that the matriarchs Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel were barren. The commentators explain that their experiences prove that the emergence of Israel is a miracle. For each new generation, it was a gift of God to a mother who could not have given birth naturally, etc., etc. And it talks about them davening for children. So this is a beautiful English Pirush. It's an English Pirush of the Chumash, and it's based on Rashi, and it's based on Divrei Chazal. So you want to be Yotzei Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum. Onkelos doesn't mean anything to you. You're not capable of learning Rashi. Okay, do the Chumash twice, and then read this beautiful English Pirush. And by doing that, you could be Yotzei Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum. Now, it could be that, again, if there are psukim that are not explained, you might have to read those psukim in the Chumash 3 times. Okay. Now we go back to the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber, middle of the line, top line. So we've established over here that you could be Yotzei Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum by doing the psukim twice and then by doing Pirush Rashi. So in that case, you're substituting Targum Onkelos, you're substituting Pirush Rashi for Targum Onkelos. However, says the Mechaber, the Yerei Shamayim, a real Yerei Shamayim, Yikra Targum v'gam Pirush Rashi, should do both Targum and Pirush Rashi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Hey, Eis Katan Vav, why is this? Targum v'gam Pirush Rashi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ki ha-Targum yesh lai maila, the Targum has a very big maila, shenitin b'Sinai. We learn in the Gemara that Targum Onkelos was actually transmitted to us at Har Sinai. The Gamu Mefarish Kol Mila Umila. Also, there's Targum Onkelos on every single pasuk. This Targum Onkelos covers every single word. Upirush Rashi Yesh Lai Maila, but on the other hand, Rashi has a Maila, Shehu Mefarish is a Inyan, Al Pi Midrash Chazal Yosem Targum. The Rashi is a much more in-depth explanation and elucidation of the Chumash. So the Mishnah Berurah says each one, Targum has one Maila, Rashi has a different Maila. In order to get both Mailas, says the Mechaber, a Yerei Shamayim should do both. Ube emes, and the truth is, says the Chavetz Chaim, Kein roi linag l'chol adam. This really is what everybody should do. Shel yilmoid b'chol shavua hasedra im Pirush Rashi levad hatargum. Really, everybody should make sure to learn the Sedra of the week with Rashi, and to also say the Targum. Ki yesh kama parshiyos b'Torah, because there are many passages in the Torah, ubeprat b'chelik Vayikra, certainly in Sefer Vayikra, that goes through all the karbanos and the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash and in the Mishkan, she'i efshar lahavinam klal al yidei Targum l'chud. These are parts of the Chumash that you simply cannot understand them just by reading Targum Onkelos. So therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, really everybody should do the Parsha of the week, Shnayim Mikra, Echad Targum, and Pirush Rashi. Now the Mishnah Berurah says an interesting thing, and I have to say that this piece of the Mishnah Berurah stumped me for a long time, until I think I figured it out, Baruch Hashem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Misha ein biyadai targum. Let's say somebody has no access to Targum right now. He has a Hebrew Tanakh. It has no Rashi. It has no Targum. All it is the Lashon HaKodesh text of the Torah. That's what he has. Misha ein biyadai targum, rak ha-chumash levad yesh lo. All he has is the psukim of the Chumash. What should he do? Yikra shnei pa'amim mikra. He should read the psukim twice. Shnai mikra. Va'achakach ki yishdamen lo targum. Yomar. And then later, when he gets hold of a Chumash that has Targum Onkelos, or he gets Rashi, then he'll do the Targum, or he'll do Rashi. Now, what exactly is the Mishnah Berurah telling me here? I looked at this, and I'm like, what's the Chiddush? What Chiddush and Halacha is the Mishnah Berurah telling me here? This is the Chavetz Chaim. He didn't waste words. So this line and a half, or 2 lines of Mishnah Berurah, what's he telling me? I think what the Mishnah Berurah is telling me is like this. We have seen that when you have psukim that have no targum, you say the mikra 3 times. We saw that when you're doing shtayim mikra and you're doing it with Pirush Rashi, if there's no Rashi on a particular pasuk, you say that pasuk 3 times. I think the chiddush that the Mishnah Berurah is telling me over here is, if you're sitting down to do shtayim mikra vecha targum, and all you have is a Hebrew Torah, a Hebrew Chumash, you don't have any Rashi, you don't have any Targum Onkelos, you might think you should sit down and you should do Mikra 3 times, and you'll be Yoitze Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum by doing Mikra on the whole Parsha 3 times. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Do the Mikra twice and do Targum or Rashi when you get your hands on it. Don't go ahead and be Yoitze Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum just by reading the Psukim 3 times. Do Shnayim Mikra, because now that's what you have the opportunity to do. Later on, get your hands on a Targum Onkelos and then do Targum or do Rashi. Now the Pri Megadim says, but if you know that you're not going to have Targum or Rashi before Shabbos, do the Mikra 3 times. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter. Lo yikra pasuk hamu'ucher kaidam hamukdam. Don't do Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum out of order. Don't say, you know what, today I'm in the mood of reading the part of the Chumash about Yaakov Avinu taking the brachas. So I'm going to skip to the end of the Parsha, and I'm going to do Shtay Mikra Vecha Targum on the end of the Parsha. Then maybe tomorrow I'll be more in the mood of learning about Yitzchak going to Avimelech Melech Plishtim. I'll do that tomorrow. No, you have to do it in order. Lo Yikra Shtei Par Mikra Vecha Kach. Lo Yikra Targum. I skipped. Lo Yikra. Lo yikra pasuk ha'ma'ucher kaidem ha'mukdam el yikra keseder. Next halach. Lo yikra targum tchila v'achkach mikra. You're supposed to specifically do this in the order of shnayim mikra, twice the psukim and lashon hakodesh, and then targum. So don't do it the other way around. Don't do lo yikra targum tchila. Don't say I want to do Onkelos first. No. Lo yikra targum tchila v'achkach mikra el yikra lechatchila shnayim mikra b'kaidem. Do Shtayim Mikra first, V'achakach Targum, and then do Targum. I'll tell you a place that this is very negaya. I have seen people that what they like to do is like this. They lay in the Parsha once inside, they do Mikra once. Then they go to the Targum and they do Targum. So now they've done Mikra once and they've done Targum. Now they come to Shul Shabbos morning and by Kriyas HaTorah, they say it along quietly with the Balkaire, and they do the second time Mikra. But when you do that, you're doing Mikra, Targum, and then Mikra. And the Mishnah Berurah seems to say not that way. Mishnah Berurah says very clearly over here that what you should do is Yikra lechatchila shnayim Mikra mikaidem. You should do the Mikra twice first, v'achakach Targum, and then you should do Targum. Next. Im efshaloi shaloi yafsik b'shtayim Mikra vecha Targum al shum davar. Very interesting. Chavetz Chaim says, if you could do Shnayim Mikra ve'echa Targum without being mafsik in the middle, without any interruptions, that would be great. Toiv v'yafeh ma'od. It's good and beautiful to do that. Now, looking at the words of the Chavetz Chaim, I'm not going to read it inside now because we're running late, but if you look at the words of the Chavetz Chaim in Sha'ar Tzion, Ois Kat and Yod Aleph, it's very clear from the Chavetz Chaim that what he means is, if you could sit down to do the entire Parsha, Shnayim mikra v'echad targum. In one shot, with no interruptions, no hefsekim. You don't talk to anybody. You don't take a phone call. Paiskim say, if you need a drink in the middle, you can take a drink. You have to go to the Beis HaKisei. Certainly, you're rechuyev to go to the Beis HaKisei. But no, you're not mafsik. You don't start schmoozing with anybody. You don't take any phone calls. You do the entire Parsha Shnayim Mikra V'echad Targum. That would be beautiful. Toiv v'yafem ha'oid. Why? Because then it's done in a kvius. It's done. You sat down. You were concentrating on it. You did the whole thing in one shot. You got the whole thing. So it doesn't mean that when you sit down to do Shnayim Mikra V'echad Targum, let's say your minig is that on Sunday you do the first aliyah, right? So then you're doing it with Hefsekis. You're doing till Sheni on Sunday. You're doing from Sheni to Shlishi on Monday. So you're being mafsik. You're not doing the whole parsha in one shot. Then you're not being Mekayim what he says over here, Toiv v'yafem ha'oid. From the Shar Tzion, it seems that certainly if you do what I just said, if you do till Sheni on Sunday, from Sheni to Shlishi on Monday, certainly whatever piece you're sitting down to do, certainly you shouldn't be mafsik in that piece. That you certainly shouldn't do. The Toiv v'yafem ha'oid is if you sit down and you do the whole parsha Shnayim Mikra V'echad Targum one shot. That's what's Toiv v'yafem ha'oid. To do one piece at a time, that certainly, whenever you're sitting down to do a particular piece, don't be mafsik in doing that piece. And I think it's very easy to understand why. If you sit down to do, right now I'm sitting down to do Shnayim Mikra V'echad Targum from the beginning of the parsha till Sheni. If you sit down and you read the Mikra twice, and then you do the Rashi on it, you get it as a whole limud. You're not getting interrupted in the middle. You're not losing track. You're not losing your train of thought. You're doing it with concentration. You're doing it with the kviyus, right? It's like the old thing that I'm forgetting right now who they say it over from, one of the Bali Musar, that there's a huge difference between learning 6 hours and learning an hour at a time 6 times, right? You learn an hour and then you take a break. And then you learn an hour and you take a break. You learn an hour and you take a break. The difference between that and sitting down and learning for 6 hours is huge. You sit down with concentration and you learn straight for 6 hours, you get a lot more than you do the other way. My uncle, Rav Moshe Weiss, who was a Goyen and an Adam Gadol Ma'oid, the Mechutin of the Friedrich Klausenberger Rebbe, he told me, and he told my children, one of the first things that you have to learn if you want to become a Gadol B'Torah is you need to learn how to be able to learn for a long time straight with no interruptions. And he told us about the time, pre-war Europe in Munkach, how he and his charusa learned, you're going to fall off your chair, they learned kemat 3 days straight, without sleeping. And they had a little food by their table. They had to interrupt for davening, obviously they had to interrupt to go to the Beis HaKisei, but that was it. They learned kemat 3 days straight like this. He told me what they learned. Psachim Daf Mem Beis, where the famous, there's a machlokes over there between the Melchamas and the Ramban. There's a big machlokes over there. They learned that sugya for kemat 3 days straight. So what we're saying over here is, if you could do the whole parsha Shnayim Mikra V'echad Targum in one sitting, that's Toiv v'yafem ha'oid. But whatever piece you are sitting down to do, certainly you shouldn't be mafsik while you're doing that piece. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, v'chein re'isi me'hamadaktik k'maisim kain. The Chavetz Chaim says he saw people that were medaktik b'halacha. This is what they did. V'chein royal bal nefesh lasois, and this is what a bal nefesh should do. And he brings this down from the Shari Knesset Agdolah b'shem Seder Hayoim. V'chein koser shavi achreinim. Seder Hayoim was a sefer that was written by one of the Gedolei HaMekubalim in Tzfas, who lived at the same time as the Mechaber. I think the same time as the Mechaber. Okay. Moving along to Sif Gimel. Second line down here on Samach Gimel Amud Beis says the Mechaber. Miyayim Rishon ve'elech chashuv im hatzibur. We said that the chiyuv of Shnayim Mikra V'echad Targum is that you have to be mashlim parshiyosav im hatzibur. You have to complete your learning of the parsha together with the tzibur. Okay, when can I start doing it? Says the Mechaber, Miyam Rishon ve'elech. You could start on Sunday. We're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah that's lav dafka. Really, you could start Shabbos afternoon. But the words of the Mechaber, Miyam Rishon ve'elech chashuv im hatzibur, from Sunday and on, That's called doing it with the tzibur. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Zayin, Yom Rishon ve'elech. Why? Kevin shemaskilim b'minchasa de Shabbat likros parsha shavua haba. When do they start laning the next parsha, next week's parsha? Shabbos afternoon by mincha, right? That's when the tzibur starts to lane the next parsha. So nechshav shuv hakoyrei kikariyim hatzibur. So from that time on, it's called that you're doing it with the tzibur, because the tzibur already started. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Kain, but based on this, when the mechaber says from Sunday and on, lavdafgu, it's imprecise. It doesn't mean really from Sunday, it really means from Shabbos afternoon. Now, what my Rebbe, Rabbi Feinstein, Lazang Gesund Stark, what he taught me was that this doesn't mean for when you daven mincha. It means from mincha gedolah, the earliest time that you could daven mincha Shabbos afternoon. Because once you hit mincha gedolah, somebody in Klal Yisrael, they're already davening mincha, they already started laning next week's parsha, you could already start doing shtayim mikra v'echad targum, because it's called im hatzibur. Now that's very valuable information, because like, let's say this season, right? Let's say you're going to daven mincha at a 4 o'clock minyan, right? So you can't start being Mavisedra until after you daven mincha. But if you know that you could start from mincha gedolah, that means 12:35, I could already start being Mavisedra for next week's parsha. So I got a whole bunch of more hours to squeeze in here to already start being Mavisedra on next week's parsha. Ois Katan Ches, that's called Choshev Im Hatzibur, says the Mishnah Berurah. Kam Achreinim Kosvu, many Achreinim write them in a Mufcherhu. It would be it's the proper way to do it, L'kroisa be'erev Shabbos. When should you do Shtayim Mikra V'echad Targum? On Erev Shabbos. Don't start the previous Shabbos afternoon. Don't start Sunday. No, do it on Erev Shabbos. Okay. V'ayin b'shari tshuva, the Shari Tshuva writes, so b'sefer Mat Yehuda Kosav, Demu kairem et tchilas hashavua v'hala, but they write that if you start from the beginning of the week, who gam came b'chlal mitzvah min hamuvcher, that's also mitzvah min hamuvcher. I can tell you again, my Rebbe, Rav Feinstein, Shlita, Lazang Gesund Stark, he starts being Mavisedra the next week as early as humanly possible, and he finishes it as soon as he can. Most of the time, at least in my dealings with him, most of the time he was finished being Mavisedra on next week's parsha, at least Shtayim Mikra V'echad Targum, maybe not Rashi, but Shtayim Mikra V'echad Targum, he was finished by Motzei Shabbos. And I once asked him why, and he looked at me like I'm crazy. He said, I don't understand, I have a chiyuv. I want to dispose of my chiyuv. I have a chiyuv. I have a chiyuv to the Rosh. I have a chiyuv to go do Shtayim Mikra V'echad Targum. The chiyuv starts by Mincha Gedolah Shabbos afternoon. That's when the chiyuv starts. So what am I doing? I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs, and I'm waiting to be Mekayim my chiyuv until the end of the week? I have a chiyuv. I got to be Mekayim it. Does he look? I remember he got upset with me. He was like, you don't understand the question. Like, what a silly question. So by him, it's definitely Min HaMuvcher. Do it as soon as humanly possible. That's the Min HaMuvcher. He would never understand people who were behind in Shtayim Mikra V'echad Targum. How are you behind? You started already Shabbos afternoon the week before. A whole week you weren't Mekayim your chiyuv of Shtayim Mikra V'echad Targum. He was totally mystified by it. He couldn't begin to understand it. It's brought down from the Gra in the Sefer Ma'aseh Rav. Kasav bar Gaza Grosha, Yinoi Tekav Achar Atfila B'chol Yom, Likroi Biktas Me'asedr Shtayim Mikra V'echad Targum U'Mesayim B'erev Shabbos. So you see that the Gra himself, the Gra didn't sit down and do the whole parsha in one shot. The Gra did every day. He did some. And then he finished it on Erev Shabbos. Okay, we're going a little bit long, so we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time, Yetz Hashem, with Sif Dalet. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This listen to limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shem should send Yeshua Sefuras Parnaset Sheduchim to all those in need. We should be Zoichet to see the BS Gal Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.